Hey guys, this is Mr. O'Brien here, and in this video, we're actually going to explain how carbon is uniquely suited to form biological macromolecules. So first of all, we're looking at the element of carbon. So carbon actually has 4 valence electrons. So in other words, it can form these macromolecules. And we're talking about macro, that's a key word. Macro just simply means very large. And molecules, obviously, are just molecules that we have here. So again, we're looking in this chapter of large molecules made of carbon. Now, all living organisms are composed of matter. And again, matter is just simply anything that takes up space and has mass. So carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, helium, lithium. These are parts of the periodic table. These are elements and they take up space, they have mass, therefore they are matter. Again, anything that takes up space and has mass. Now we're looking at our general atom. The atom is the basic unit of chemical elements and they're made of 3 parts. They're made of protons, electrons, and neutrons. Now again, protons are positively charged particles in the nucleus. So right here is our proton. And notice that it has a positive charge in that. So again, these positive particles are found inside of our nucleus or just simply the center of the molecule. Now, neutrons are neutrally charged, meaning they have no particular charge, and they are also found inside of the nucleus. Again, they have a charge of 0. I just like to put them as equal. And then finally, we have the electrons. Now, the electrons are these molecules floating on the outside. They're flying around the outside of the molecule. And electrons have a negative charge. So electrons are actually the ones that counteract the positive charge of the protons to make a neutral atom. So when we look at this, protons are found in the nucleus. Neutrons are found in the nucleus. Okay, and electrons are the only ones that are different, and these are flying around the outside of that molecule. Now, an element is the simplest form of matter, and it cannot be broken down into other substances by chemical reactions. So again, these molecules cannot be broken down. They can only be rearranged in a chemical formula. So, for example here, lithium is always going to be lithium. There's no way that we can break that down. It's not like we can just make more of it. Now, a compound's a little bit different. So here is our compound, and what a compound is a substance that is formed when 2 or more chemical elements are combined together. So for example, we have H2O. That's made of hydrogen and oxygen. So 2 different atoms combined together to form a compound or something that is combined together. Now a mixture is something that is combined together as well, but it can, and keyword is can, be separated. So for example, we have oil and we have our solids in Italian dressing. You can shake that up as much as you want and mix it up, mix it up, mix it up, but if you let it set, what's going to happen is the oil is going to separate away from the solid, and you can always separate the 2 things. A better example that I have is if I have a cup of water. So in that cup of water, I put salt, right? So you put salt in water, you may think you never can separate it. But what happens is if I put a heat lamp on it, what's going to happen is the water is going to evaporate away and the salt's going to be left behind. Think of it like a mixed bag of jelly beans. You can separate the orange, the green, the red, and the yellow to get all of the different variables. Now, when molecules bond, atoms want to have a grand total of 8 electrons in their valence shell. Now, a valence shell, or the valence electrons, are the electrons that are found in the outer energy level that are responsible for giving the atoms its reactive property. So, for example, hydrogen has one electron in its outer shell. Oxygen has one, two, three, four, five, six in its outer shell. Nitrogen has one, two, three, four, five in its outer shell. So what you're looking at here is not the total number of electrons, but simply how many electrons are found in that outer shell. So this leads us to what's known as the octet rule. So the octet rule are that atoms want or need 8 electrons to become stable. So again, octet, octagon gives us our 8. So again, they always want to have 8 electrons around it. So if I have my molecule here, the most stable elements are the ones with 8 electrons around it. So atoms and elements are going to bond until they get those 8 electrons. Again, just like in our bus here, our electrons, they fill up the bus, therefore they're happy and stable. Again, the octet rule just means 8 electrons in the outer shell. So we have two different types of bonds that can happen here. We have covalent bonds, and covalent bonds is when when there's a bond between molecules when they are sharing electrons. So in this case, I have, let's just say chlorine. I have two chlorines, and they usually have 7 electrons in the outer shell. So again, they're not happy because they don't have their 8. So what happens is they will share these 2 electrons and they will form a compound, chlorine gas, that is much more stable. Now ionic bonds is when these molecules transfer electrons. And what we do is we're creating charged ions because those molecules are transferred. So over here, let's just say we have sodium. Sodium has 1 valence electron, and chlorine has 7, like I showed up above. So what happens is this sodium will transfer the electron over, and it will become a positive ion. The chlorine then accepts that, and because electrons are negative, becomes more negative. Now, the plus and the minus attract each other. That's how the bond is formed. So carbon is the most important element to living things because it can form many different kinds of bonds and more essential compounds. All living things contain carbon. That's why carbon-containing molecules are called organic. So carbon is the fourth most abundant element in the universe and is the building blocks of all life. All living things contain carbon. Now, individual carbon atoms have an incomplete outer electron shell, which allows other elements to easily bond. So if we look here, if I have this molecule of carbon, notice in its valence shell we have 4 electrons, making it other elements easily bond to it. So carbon has an atomic number of 6, but what we really want to look at are those valence electrons in the outer shell, the 1, 2, 3, and 4 electrons in the outer shell, which makes it bond easily. Now again, remember that valence shell is only looking at the outer energy level of an atom. It's not looking at the total number, it's looking at the outer energy level. So how many valence electrons are found in a molecule of carbon? Now remember, carbon has 6 electrons. So if we look, carbon's first energy level can only contain 2. Therefore, the outer energy level will contain 4 electrons. So it's going to look something like this. Again, total number, if I look here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total, but remember, only 4 electrons are in the outer shell. Therefore, it has a valence number of 4. Now, with those 4 electrons, how many bonds can it form with other molecules? So if I look here, the blue is the carbon, the red is the hydrogen. Notice how they will share electrons, and what we will create is a grand total of 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds. So these electrons are being shared. What type of bond do you think we are getting? So again, these are covalent bonds. And remember, covalent bonds are the ones that are shared. Now again, carbon has a lot of unique properties. So carbon atoms have unique properties that allow it to form covalent bonds to as many as 4 different molecules. So this makes carbon one of the most versatile elements, ideal to serve as the basic structure component or backbone of macromolecules. So carbon is considered the backbone of macromolecules because it's one of the most important. Carbon, remember, is the backbone. So macromolecules are very large molecules, especially used in reference to large biological polymers such as nucleic acids, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. So again, these are our 4 major macromolecules. Carbon can also form a lot of complicated molecules. We have spheres. We can make tubes. We can make sheets. So carbon's ability to form or bond to 4 different molecules means it can make these complicated large structures in a lot of different patterns. Now, carbon also has the ability to form long chains because they can bond so many together. So we have 2 different types of chains. We have a saturated chain, which would be like this one right here. Again, that would be saturated. And the reason that it's saturated is each one of these carbons is bonded to 4 different molecules. In other words, the carbon is saturated with bonds. Now, an unsaturated would be a molecule that has double or triple bonds. So this would be a double bond. So in other words, it's sharing 2 sets of electrons. So whenever you see that double bond, it does no longer contains 4 bonds to each carbon. It is then an unsaturated molecule. Now, since biology is the study of life, we talk about living things. Organic compounds are found in these living things. So remember, an organic compound or any large class of chemical compounds in which one or more atom of carbon are covalently linked to atoms of other elements. So again, organic contains carbon. Inorganic, usually no carbon is present. So that's how we distinguish between the 2 terms. So again, that would be, hopefully this helps you out with distinguishing what carbon is and how it helps. So again, carbon is very important, can form 4 covalent bonds, which makes it large and makes complicated molecules. Hopefully this helps you out. Again, this is Mr. O'Brien signing off.